Okay, we're here on the SchmearCast. I am rejoined by Sean Byrne. We have a doozy of a Severance episode to discuss. Episode 7 of Season 2. Episode title is Chikhai Bardo, and we can get into what the hell that means a little later. And Sean, we're going to be joined by the director of the episode and the cinematographer of the show, Jessica Lee Gagne, a little later. So that's very exciting. But Sean, I want to start off by asking you, if you were caught in a mudslide, would you be more worried about suffocating or drowning?
I think I'm a suffocating guy in that scenario. I don't know. That was such a weird question that I almost paused the episode to ponder myself at 2:30 in the morning. But I think I'm a suffocate guy.
It's a real is a hot dog a sandwich kind of question, a real brain breaker.
I need to know what that tells Lumon.
Yes, we're referring to a question that poor Gemma is asked in the export hall, amongst many other prodding and poking and whatever the hell's to this poor woman that really is the center of this episode, Chikhai Bardo. This is where do we even begin? This was a very hard episode to watch for many reasons. It's an amazing episode. I had to watch it twice. It is dense in terms of what happens plot-wise. It is dense emotionally. I just want to start off by asking you, help me make sense of it. What did you think of this episode, Sean Byrne, Chikhai Bardo? How did it make you feel? And can you explain it intellectually?
Well, first, this is maybe the perfect episode to bring a cinematographer and a director on for any show I've ever watched. I looked at this and I was like, thank God we get to talk to her for this one, because it was such a beautiful episode, visually stunning. I really thought it was horrifying and devastating and beautiful. It kind of reminded me, I don't know if you were a Last of Us guy, but kind of reminded me of the Bill and Frank episode of The Last of Us Season 1, where it kind of felt like a little bit of a departure from what we were used to watching with this show. Obviously, it ties back in, and you kind of see the dueling storylines, but it felt different in the best way possible. And I really thought it captured the human experience in a way that a lot of shows don't do. I think the time lapses worked in a way that a lot of other shows can't accomplish. I don't know what sauce they put into this episode, man, but it was it really ripped me, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Dan Erickson wrote the episode. He is the creator of the show. When the big gun comes in for the script stage, this one's circled on the calendar. Episode 7 is a big one, just like we had the similar feeling with episode 4, I needed 2 watches, like I mentioned. I watched it once. I queued it up immediately again because it is so dense, and it's such a total tonal shift from what we're used to. I love what you say about that Last of Us episode. That didn't even come to mind. It really reminded me of the Lost episode, The Constant, with Desmond Hume, another episode that is a departure from what you usually feel and see with the show in a way that is really striking and really moving. A mini movie, you could say. But I got to tell you, I'm a little conflicted, and maybe we could sort through this, but I think I'm more impressed by the episode than genuinely moved by it. So I'm impressed by the editing, and I'm impressed by the production design. I'm very impressed by Dichen Lachman, who is no longer serving face.
I was going to say that.
She's now serving dialogue, too, which, welcome to the party.
She crushed it, man.
So I love the episode, but I am curious if moving ahead, if I'm going to be able to connect what happens in it to the characters on their emotional journeys. Do you know what I mean? Or is it going to just be, whoa, that was a cool, amazing hour of TV? Or is this going to inform how we see Mark and how we see Gemma moving ahead?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think for me, it definitely touched me more than maybe it might have touched you, emotionally. And attachment-wise for these characters, maybe just where I am at life in my personal life, right? With just kind of growing up and, getting married, and my wife and I have our first, born on the way. So it's, I think there's a lot of heavy things in this episode that I could really latch onto, and maybe not everyone's going to feel that way, but for whatever reason, for me, it just absolutely rocked me. I was literally watching it. It was 2 a.m. I was up too late. I was like, I got to watch this tonight. And I was kind of annoyed that I had to watch it, because I was just I got to go to bed, man. This is going to be annoying in the morning. But I was excited to watch it. And then I turned it on. And I'm and I was holy, I almost ran it back, So I was just yeah, really, really hit me.
I mean, you're a deep feeling man, but you're also a lore guy, and there's some crazy lore in this episode too, and I really want to get into, because there are some things that, you know, you're on this emotional roller coaster, and these beautiful images of Gemma and Mark and their courtship and their relationship, and then you get hit with something in the export hall that you're just like, wait, whoa, what? Like, let's rewind that back. Like, we've never seen these people. What's happening here? Like, it was like too much to comprehend.
Yeah,
the rewatch helped a lot, and I'm sure you got most of it on the first time. But I'd love to throw at you like, what the hell is happening, and see your feelings on it. Before we dive into the episode, you know, you mentioned it at the top, and it was exactly right. But Jessica Lee Gagne, the director of this episode, the cinematographer of the show, she set the visual template for Severance with Ben Stiller, and she directs here, and it's so staggeringly beautiful and unique. And for a show where you know what the aesthetic is, or you think you know, here it surprises us with like a graininess to the film lens and the camera, and a warmth that I don't think we've ever seen in Severance, which we think of as such a cold show. Everyone swung for the fences and connected, I think.
I agree. And that's why I tied in the Bill and Frank episode from Last of Us, because I thought it did something very similar with the way it was shot, just so opposite of what we were used to. The film grain was such a cool aspect, you know, like the warm tones, like everything was such a different vibe. And I think it really conveyed the message of, you know, who Mark was and who Gemma was before all of this shit happened. And it was just like, you know, I made the joke, I think last episode or 2 episodes ago, like, how is Mark pulling all these women? Like, what is happening here? And then in this episode, you're like, oh, he's just a fucking man, for lack of a better word. Like,
he's the steez master.
He's charming.
He has the 5 o'clock shadow.
Yep.
He's got an actual human haircut instead of his floppy, dumbass shit that you've been whining about every episode of the SchmearCast.
Yeah, listen,
he's looking great. He's got some game, and so does Gemma.
I knew he had potential in him, so I'm glad you know, someone's got to pull it out there. And yeah, Gemma, your point about the no longer serving face, and now she's serving dialogue. She impressed the hell out of me that episode, man. Unbelievable.
So let's dive into the episode. As we mentioned, the title is Chikhai Bardo, and I had no idea what that meant, but I had to look it up. And the Bardos are the stages of death in Buddhism, and the Chikhai Bardo is the 4th Bardo. It is the moment of death. It's the transitional state of consciousness that occurs when someone begins to die. So there are multiple characters that could fit that here. Obviously, Gemma and Miss Casey and Dichen Lachman, and all 3 of them wrapped up into one. And then also Mark, who is laying there reintegrating on death's door. You know, like, I wasn't worried that Mark wouldn't make it because he's the protagonist of the show, but there is a jeopardy to the moment. The stakes are high in this episode, you know. Let's start actually with what you just mentioned, that meet cute at the blood giving at the university I think they both work at in the town of Kier. Adam Scott's hair beard situation much improved.
Stud.
Did you notice that the blood draw has the Lumon logo on it?
No, I didn't notice that.
There's a few of those little water droplets around that really give you this ominous feeling in this episode, where even if there's this story of a courtship and this love developing, Lumon's always right there, you know, and it comes up a little bit later too. So the warmth is just so exceptional, right? Like, her office and the amount of books and the light filtering through the window. It's like, honestly, the first time I'm seeing like sunshine, I think, in this show, or at least the first time I felt it.
I think so too.
What'd you think of this French song that plays over this time lapse that's very experimental, where there is love, there is sunshine, there's dancing, there's flowers? Like, were you like, am I watching the right show? Because that's how I felt.
I felt that way, but in a cool way. You know, I was just like, this was sick. Like, I was rocking with it. I don't know, because you know it's going to take a turn at some point, I guess. Right. And so I was just kind of in here for the weird creativity, art house shit. You know, I was just like, let's go. Let's get weird before we know we're going to have to climb back into the hole of Severance and get cold again in the winter of Kier. But yeah, I thought I thought it was beautiful, and I the warm tones, man, like in the office that they had all the books, and all the plants everywhere, and I just thought it was beautiful.
She loves plants. She does not love ants. It feels so different when the plot shifts to the halls of Lumon, where those harsh fluorescents are back, and we're just seeing Gemma shuffled around the export hall by this very stern, matronly-looking woman played by Sandra Bernhardt. She's like doing doll dress-up, basically. And I like I said, it took me 2 times to develop a working theory of what the hell they're doing to her down there. What'd you think, though, when you first saw what they're doing to Gemma, Miss Casey, what have you?
I had no idea. Like, when she opens up the closet or whatever and you see the outfit, I'm like, what are we doing here? And it seems like she walks into all these different rooms, and a different part of the severance chip clicks into a different personality or whatever we want to call it. And then she doesn't, I don't know if each room is a different personality, and if that's what they're testing, if she like remembers these different experiences in these rooms, if she's being tortured, or if they're just doing like normal doctor stuff or whatever. But yeah, there is some. I was hoping you had some answers.
No,
you need to be the answer.
I have a take, and I think that it's more simple than it comes off in the show, which is just that these are situations you'd want to be severed for. And so we'll walk through the rooms as we go through the plot, but like a plane crash, writing Christmas thank you notes, 1,000 of them till your hand shakes, like going to the dentist. These are situations you want to be zonked out for. You do want to be severed. She'll walk into these rooms, have a terrible thing happen to her, and come out of it with her hand hurting, with her mouth hurting, with the faint knowledge that something shitty happened in the room, but not knowing what it was.
Interesting. That's great, and that ties into the pregnancy severance conversation earlier, where she's like, "Oh yeah, I wouldn't do it without severance." And so, it really does seem that maybe that's where all this is leading, where they're making a pitch, where it's like, "Hey, we have this." Experiment basically where we've tested it. It works. All the mundane things and the things you don't like in your daily life, you could just skip them.
Right.
And
I think that's part of the joke of how the show's been received by audiences. Everyone's joking like, "Oh, I'd sever my commute," or "I'd sever like a long distance flight." It's like, okay, joke about it, but like this could really backslide very quickly.
You're like fast forwarding your life, like even. The show, one of the themes is, it's not groundbreaking, but it's, hey, you just got to enjoy all stages of your life to the best of your ability. We're not here for too long, so you gotta take every moment,
Maybe this is just because he passed away recently and I love him, but David Lynch, who I think Twin Peaks is a huge influence on Severance, I have to imagine Jessica Lee Gagne was thinking about him with some of these transitions, like the camera just being trained on Gemma's eyes as like the seasons change, and it's horrific. It's like horrifying, but in that uncanny way. Or her mouth at the dentist, where the camera like dives through her mouth.
Yep,
felt very Lynchian to me. So these rooms that she's going through, I like I said, go for it, Redditors. Tell me what these mean and what they are. But I just wrote down a few of them. I could not figure out what they meant. Drainsville, Loveland, Wellington, that's the dentist room, and Tumwater. But we should talk about the dentist. This is where like the horror really begins. We saw this man whistling, picking up dental tools from Bert's department. We do not see his face. Here we see his face. He is really scary to me. He's got these piercing blue eyes, overly like tanned face, very handsome, but very scary and with a creepiness to him. He's played by this actor named Robbie Benson, who does have those blue eyes in real life and was like a matinee idol when he was a teenager in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And it's just like a good casting. I've never seen him, but he does have a familiarity, What'd you think of this dentist? That's when we're first meeting this character who we learn is named Dr. Maurer, and he keeps showing up within the export hall. He's kind of the boss down there.
He feels like he belongs in the show, I'll say, like he feels like he's kind of always been there. Like he just fits. I don't know, something about it. And I completely agree. Like the piercing eyes and like, I don't know, something about his smile and, it's very, I don't know, a lot of Severance is that really like controlling and weird, authority figure stuff going on, right? And this just kind of amps that up to a whole new level where, you see him perhaps get a little too attached to a test subject.
I would say so. He has that kind of screw loose kind of thing in this show where Harmony Cobell has it or Milchick has it. These people aren't just there to collect their paycheck and go home. There's a belief and there's deeper, darker connection to their purpose that I think he exemplifies really well. It's not the last we'll see of him for sure. So back in the real world, and I say real world, and we're so far out of the real world in this show, but back in Mark's apartment, Devin and Ragabi, like we said last episode, obviously are button heads about what to do with Mark. I love Devin's line, "It's settled fucking law, lady."
I love Devin so much.
I am concerned about what Devin wants to do, which is call Harmony Cobell. That's a crazy jump to conclusion there, to call, as Ragabi says, the soldier, the prime soldier of Lumon. Seemed like she started the call. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Which I was very concerned about.
I thought she started it too. Maybe I got to go back and look at that scene again, but I thought she started it. But then they go back and look, and it, it was just sitting at the contact screen, I guess. But
yeah,
I think the scene, some people are going to be like, why the hell would she ever do that? And my argument for that would be like, she's the concerned sister, and her only connection to potentially getting answers in this is a woman that she felt some type of familiarity with, even if she did like trick all of them and deceive all of them and potentially almost kidnap her child. But I think in that moment, she's like, who the fuck is Ragabi? Ragabi is a total flake and a weirdo. And I was kind of in on her before this episode. After this, I'm out. I'm team no Ragabi.
It's a really fair and good point to make, because we've seen Ragabi in the first season and this season, and Mark talking with her, and for as far as we know, has the right intentions with Mark, and they're in cahoots together. Devin's like, who the hell are you, lady? But it is crazy to call Cobell.
I don't know. Like, you have to give her some answers. Like, you can't, if like Ragabi just does this over and over again where she just like teases one thing and then leaves the room. It's like, no, come back and explain something to me so I won't call this woman. Like, give me a good reason. Don't just like get up and leave. Or like with Mark's asking questions, she's like, maybe, and then leaves. It's like, dude, I know this is a show and they don't want to give all the info, but like, it's also over and over again with that character. It's like, she is, I don't know.
This episode could be the most humorless episode of Severance. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but some humor comes in a flashback where we do see Devin and Rickon and Mark and Gemma all together. We have heard hints that they were closer when Gemma was alive, and here we see it. Did you know that Rickon belayed his first Kluwa in middle school?
I had to Google that, brother.
I still don't know what it meant.
It just seems like rock climbing, scaling. I look at that guy and I'm like, that doesn't look like a guy who could rock climb to me. But I mean, yeah, that was a great like dinner scene, and it kind of felt, I don't know, like they were all friends, It was like a better time, and you got that storytelling, I think.
Yeah, I love this line from Rickon. Mark, you and I will ramble together. Don't turn down a rambling invitation from Rickon. You never know if that could be the last one,
It's fair.
But there's a great bit of communication without too much over-explaining or dialogue where we learn that Gemma's pregnant when she turns down a glass of wine, and Devin clocks it and feels like an immediate connection. Just the faces those two exchange, the information passing, the love, it was touching, It was a touching part of the episode. Here we launch into a section of the flashbacks as Gemma deals with her pregnancy. Pretty quickly, we learn that she has a miscarriage, which she's devastated by, of course. And who is there to potentially provide a path to childbirth? Lumon. The dramatic irony of knowing what the hell Lumon is and how awful they are, and them just willingly going into a very mundane office, signing a Lumon intake form, and you're just like, no, your heart just drops. To pair that with the hope that they have and the intimacy of these scenes, it's just really devastating.
Yeah, it was a tough watch. I'm sure that's, I don't know, trigger warning for some people out there in the
parents.
world. Yeah, I watched that, and like I said, my wife, she's due in May, and I was just like, I might ban her from watching this episode. Like, this is very heavy and very real and raw, and I appreciate them going there, and it hit really well for me. I don't know, like the connection all these actors have together, it just feels so real. And it's crazy because especially with Mark and Gemma, like you hadn't seen them really on screen share much together besides, you know, the wellness stuff. But yeah, the two of them together, and then, you know, just all that playing out, and then Rickon and Devin, like, I don't know, the interplay between everyone just works, and it makes it everything so much more
when you saw the Lumon logo on the intake form, how'd you feel?
I just felt gross. You know, it's just like, man, like they're just hanging their heads over everyone. They're just like watching over this little town that they control, and, you know, just pulling the strings when they feel like it. And
to make matters worse, the transition from that waiting room goes right into the laboratory room in the export hall. So as if the connection wasn't clear. Before we go back down there, you know, within Gemma's process of trying to conceive and now using Lumon's help, we see those cards that Dylan stole in the first season. I still don't get what they mean. She says that it means ego death. I don't know how, like, one man chopping at another, playing like the children's ninja game applies to that, but, you know, go for it, Gemma. But it seems to be like a Lumon psychological experiment. Did you read into this in any way, or what it meant to you?
I mean, she says, you know, like Mark is kind of just like, what the hell are you looking at? And she's just like trying to find some joy in something, it seems like. And she's like, oh, it's the same guy because of the haircut or whatever. She just basically kind of dives in and is like, you know, it's the same guy fighting his own psyche. Like, that's kind of where she goes with it. And I'm like, well, that's obviously like Severance and Mark and all of this. And I don't understand. I don't know. Like, I wonder if that's just it. Like, if that was the Easter egg.
No, I think it's interesting what you said at first, which is like, it's just Lumon keeping her busy with something, and, you know, a mind game of it. Like, it's a Rorschach test, but it was interesting seeing Mark in this episode. Props to Mark. We've been anti-Mark a couple episodes, but I feel like pre-Severance Mark was really scared of Lumon and mistrusting. And we understand why Gemma wants to believe in them, because she really wants this child. There seems to be a hint that he is down for adopting, for thinking of another way around this, to not hand over his wife and her biology to this corporation. I'm not saying that to discredit Gemma and why she has this desperation, but I just want to give props to Mark for being wary back in the day, you know?
Do you think that there's... I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on real quick. Do you think
Please.
that there's some angle with maybe they were collecting data through that program they were running, and then Gemma hit the targets for something they were looking for, and then maybe she was targeted and death faked or whatever, something plays
100%,
out.
100%. Yeah.
And then they're like, we need her. She's a great test subject. Let's just do this. And that's how this all happens. Like, that's kind of where my mind went.
Yeah, it's possible. And when she's doing those psychological testings, is she giving the right answers, whatever right means? And we know she's intelligent. She's a professor at a university, you know? It makes a lot of sense to me. So the biggest mindfuck of the episode, as we follow these blue cables in a transition down to the control room, felt very David Fincher to me, how this went down. Okay, let me just set the scene. It's this dark blue room. We have 4 macro data refiners, but they're not quite our macro data refiners. They are almost like shadow versions. They're like off-brand Mark and off-brand Helly, like the bad cereal you get at the shitty grocery store version of the classics, you know? It's very Matrix to me. It's this time lapse as they seem to be seeing what our MDRs are doing in their work, but they're on the other side of it. And I couldn't tell if they were doing the sorting that, you know, like what the action is in that shadow room is what our MDRs are seeing on their level. But
interesting.
I mean, I don't know. What's your interpretation of this?
Yeah, I think the Matrix comparison was spot on. That was like the first thing I thought of.
I thought of the architect from, you know, the Matrix sequels.
Yep.
Because we have that doctor, Dr. Maurer here. Now he's in like a sweater or something, and he's talking to Drummond. Very shadowy, very creepy. But continue. I'm sorry.
No, it's crazy. And like when they go down and they show the 4 chairs, and I was just like, are these clone? Like, are these? Like, is this them? Like, for a second, I was like, this looks like our team that we've grown up with.
No, yeah, definitely cast to resemble them.
For sure. And the whole, like, shadow idea, I agree with. And it was just eerie. Like, you see them that kind of go through the the past, of season 1 and early season 2 of Mark at the desk and looking at all these, relationships he has and watching the data. I don't know if he was watching the data get sorted or if they were pushing data to him and he was sorting it from there.
I think it's that one to me.
Which is totally possible. I wasn't sure if they were like, this is just such an important task that we need to have people hands-on monitoring, but it's probably more than monitoring because they were already monitoring it before, like they were looking at the levels. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, I think. And like, who even knows the relationship between the two guys that we're overseeing? So there's, I don't know. Like, I want to know, like, I can't wait for like Reddit to explode on this. I'm going to dive in all weekend.
Yeah. I also kind of like the not knowing because it is very evocative in a way that you like, I don't know, maybe if too much light was shown on it, it would be less interesting. But I'm just like in this,
that's fair,
this world of mystery down there. Gemma asks Dr. Maurer what will happen when she finishes all the rooms. And he says, you will see the world again, and the world will see you. And she says, what about Mark? And it seems that Gemma in the export hall knows about Mark, has her consciousness in a way that Miss Casey didn't. And, she goes up the elevator a little bit later on. She forgets everything that's going on down there.
Yeah.
So her concern for Mark was surprising, honestly. And Dr. Maurer says, Kier will take away all his pain, which is not ominous at all,
Do you think that that's just actually her down there and she remembers everything? Or do you think that maybe she just has this, like, we always talk about like love transcending everything. Right. Like, is it just Mark in her mind? That's like the one memory that she holds on to.
Beats me. I have no idea.
It's I mean, like I said, I don't want the answers.
If it was normal her, wouldn't she be like, get me the fuck out of here? Like,
well, she kind of does. Like, yeah. Maybe over the course of all of this is like, we theorized earlier on that like they're just putting her soul back together or her brain piecing it together or whatever it is. Like, maybe over all the sorting of this that she's, at 96% or whatever they say, maybe now she's like starting to get some agency again where she's just like, fuck this. Like, I need to dip. Like, where's Mark? And so maybe that's where they're going. But
I think she also senses that like she's nearing the completion of the mission. And even though she doesn't overhear this, Drummond does say to Dr. Maurer, like, you will have to kill her at the end of this. Classic scientist falling for his subject, like the human element getting involved in what should be so sterile and so scientific. It's just a classic trope. Let's talk about the export hall. Let's talk about some of the situations. We mentioned that these are potentially things you want to be severed for. Mentioned that flight. I don't know why she's in an 80s, outfit with the updo. She looked great. Yep. The costumes were amazing.
Yeah, they were great.
I thought this was a specific Lost reference because in Lost, there's always flashing back to the plane going down. That first moment when the turbulence hits and someone flies up and smacks the ceiling. So I thought that was a reference to that. Within the export hall, great production design. I love that pinprick blood thing to open the door, or these like Lumon sponges that are food that get fried in this very brief moment that has no importance to the plot, but is fantastic world building.
That was very Star Wars to me. I like Star Wars has a lot of these like microwavable meals that you'll see like them use every now and then, where you just put them in a machine and pop out a full meal. Like that's kind of what I got from that.
Couple choice flavors, candied carrots and marrow or something.
Yeah.
But the most notable scene I'd say is this Christmas morning moment. She's in the room with Dr. Maurer. He's wearing a ridiculous, ugly sweater. The plane scene felt like the 80s. This feels very 50s to me, like mid-century. Can't really explain it. She's been gifted an electric router, and she's writing thank you cards. And he's just sitting there like a very misogynistic husband watching his housewife sign away all these cards. And kind of like Milchick in the last episode, she's got a massive stack of these. Her penmanship is getting terrible. Like, she's clearly like losing the grip, literally.
Yep.
What'd you think of this moment? I just thought that this was like so bizarre, first of all, but like something unique about the misogyny of it and like the mid-century aspect to it too.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I didn't really put together all of the the mundane or the things that you wouldn't want to do or things that people might potentially want to get severed for, like room concept that you mentioned earlier. I didn't quite put that together when I was watching it. So now like kind of looking back on it, I'm like, all right, well maybe that makes a little bit more sense, but I don't know why they would do the different time periods. I don't know if it's more the timelessness of Severance and they just kind of don't want us to focus on the year. They just want us to focus on the story.
Sure.
Maybe, my mind was like, are they testing her to see like how, like where she's going to push this with, misogyny or with, the dental procedures or with whatever these things, like what triggers might be. I don't know. But yeah, like super weird. Why a electric router? Why is that what we're doing? Like, I don't know what the goal is here. And I don't know if this was more like maybe like he's setting up a dream sequence of like what his relationship might look like a perfect relationship.
It certainly seemed that way. Like he makes her say to him that she loves him. She obviously doesn't. Yeah, Dr. Maurer, what a fucking creep.
Yeah, that dude.
What is the like? I couldn't place this trope, but like where else is the scientist falling for his subject and them just smacking them over the head?
Frankenstein, maybe? Like,
but in a romantic way too, like
fair.
It's so classic that the scientist falls for the subject and like forgets the scientific mission of what they're doing, no matter how evil it is.
I feel like I just watched that in
I can't.
You definitely didn't see this, but in Creature Commandos, you didn't watch that, right? Yeah,
no, I did not.
they do like the Frankenstein's bride, do the same thing, and scientist falls for the bride and forgets the mission.
There's something very satisfying about this trope. I mean, it's creepy as all hell, especially when, we should talk about the scene where she attacks, hopefully kills Dr. Maurer. He's so smitten and gross, and like he's trying to tell her that Mark has moved on in the outie world and that maybe you had feelings in another room and you developed them for me,
creepy,
and ooh la la, like get the fuck out of here, Dr. Maurer. By the way, Maurer, looked it up. What does Maurer mean? Ant. And she hates ants.
Interesting.
By the way, that Christmas scene flashes back to Gemma's real life and a really warm Christmas scene with Mark. And even though they're struggling with the conception of their child, there's still like a beauty and warmth to that. And we have that classic, like, we know this is Gemma's last goodbye to Mark. He almost doesn't say I love you, and he basically barely does.
Yeah.
And you're just like, shit, man, this is her end. You got to know that.
He just we
know that.
Scenes like that just make you really like get really introspective for a second and be like, am I doing enough? Like, like I thought about, times and I'm like, shit, I probably should have gave like a better goodbye, or I should have went to that thing. And you never really know.
The old Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle.
Yeah. So I thought that worked really well. But when I saw, when he was being creepy and just being like, well, maybe you had feelings in there, and he's being all stuck up, and I just see that chair come flying in from like right center of the screen, I was just like, yeah, let's go. Like, just crank this dude over the head right now.
Crank him.
I loved it.
We love the sound effects in this show. It could have killed him. It sounded like a heavy hit. But yeah, that was extremely satisfying. Back to that moment, like that last goodbye. Remind me never to let Mark be a furniture assembler for me.
That looked like a tough... I'm going to have to build a nursery here soon.
Well, he was in the dark, so that's... Maybe turn a light on first.
Yeah,
okay?
True.
But then, aside from that, Mark was getting way too frustrated. Take a deep breath, Mark. Find
see how many
instructions.
pegs? There's way too many pegs.
Make sure you have everything laid out in front of you. What I think permeated in that scene, you mentioned love. I think music can permeate the bounds of Severance. There's this Billie Holiday song playing in that Christmas moment that seems to then come into Gemma's room in the export hall. Why they let her have her songs from the outside, I don't know, to move the plot along, but I'm into it. Dr. Maurer, before he gets cranked, he makes fun of Gemma reading a book, and we know Gemma was a Russian history professor. The book is Death of Ivan Ilyich. It's a novella by Leo Tolstoy, and I've not read this, but I looked up what it is about, and it's about a man dying on his deathbed, figuring out way too late what was important in his life that he missed out on, like family and meaning, and how you want these things, but it's now too late. The Akira Kurosawa movie Ikiru is about this, and for a more layperson, Click from Adam Sandler is a little bit about this. But how do you think, when I tell you what that novella means, why do you think that specifically might be referenced here?
That's why I'm glad I'm doing this podcast with you, because you can explain all the literature
The
things
high
to me.
and the low. We got Click. We got.
I'll put my tin hat on, and you could dive into the Russian literature. Yeah, I think that's why we all love this show, right? There's nothing by accident. Everything is thought of. You could dive into all these things, and I think that's obviously a theme of the episode, but it's also a theme of Severance, and it's more. I think you might have said it the last episode where. Severance is, you have all these sci-fi elements, and we want to know these mysteries and all the deep dark secrets of Lumon, but in reality it's just kind of a show about relationships and these interworking of these characters and how they're growing throughout this story. And so that's kind of where I take all these things, and I think it's trying to teach a lesson that most of us, if not all of us, can appreciate
and can relate to.
Yeah.
Before we close, I just want to discuss how different the innie life of Gemma is versus the innie life of Mark. And it's so wild that this couple that is in love, this relationship, are so close to each other in this building, yet couldn't be further due to Severance, due to Lumon's machinations. But also, Mark is in this carpeted plush MDR floor, just sorting data, listening to music, having waffle parties, getting an egg bar and melons and friends. Gemma is being put through the fucking ringer. Just straight up human torture, animal cruelty, basically, but on a human being. I just think it's worth pointing out, how drastically different their Lumon experiences are and how much shittier hers is. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Mark's got it easy.
Mark does have it easy, I don't know, the whole point of him doing it was to kind of separate from that emotional distress. So, at least any Mark for a couple episodes had no worries in the world.
I mean, will he find out what's being done to Gemma is the question I think we're all wondering.
Maybe to a degree. I think it's going to build to that in these final couple episodes here. I don't know if he'll know the extent of it. I don't know if he'll be able to see the rooms or see, what these, shadow MDR team is doing in the basement. But I think they'll come face to face and we'll learn something with each other.
Well, Gemma does come face to face with someone, and that is Milchik. And that was kind of surprising to see him so late in the episode and for such a brief moment. He's just company man through and through this. I don't think he's so evil and upset and get the fuck back down there, but he is towing the party line, pushing her back down to the export hall after she tries to make an escape. But what was notable, she comes up the export hall elevator. She's in that hallway, and now she's Miss Casey again.
Yep.
And she's got that lobotomized look and feeling. So that further strengthens my thinking that on the export hall, she's pretty with it,
Yeah.
What'd you make of this? This is basically how the episode wraps up. As she gets thwarted, she cries and slumps down. And Mark kind of wakes up back in the outside world.
Well, when Milchik popped up, I was just kind of disappointed. That's what he's going to have to do. He's not going to be oh, yeah, let's go. But he pops up. You want him to so bad. Yeah. And you could tell he sprinted there. You could tell someone called him and they were get to the export hall. Yeah, he seemed out of breath to me. The second he opened it, and he was just it's like someone made the call and they were get there fucking immediately. And so he was just kind of panicked, why don't you just what he says? He says oh, you were here for some art exhibit and you went up the wrong elevator. Why don't you just go that way? And it's just so she makes this great escape down low and finally gets up that elevator, and she's not sure what's going to happen when she gets up there, and then she just gets forced right back down, and it's just so defeating. It's kind of mirrors some of the Helly stuff in season 1, I think.
Yeah,
where she keeps trying to dip and she keeps doing all these radical things, and none of it makes a difference. So I kind of got that from it, and the one shot of when she's in the elevator and Mark looking out of his front door, seeing the police walk up his steps. The two of them there with the use of the blacks and the fade
each other, right?
And they're facing each other.
Yeah.
And I was oh man, just absolutely.
We should ask
beautiful.
Jessica about that shot.
That's might be my first question. The creativity in this. I don't know if I've seen a show do it in a long, long time.
I mean, that's the episode. Very curious what people will think of it. I could see it turning a lot of people off just because it isn't mystery box jazz party dance scene. It's not a funny happy-go-lucky Severance episode. It is pretty devastating.
Yeah.
What do you think people will make of this episode? Do you think they'll appreciate it for its artistic value and what it does for the emotions, or do you think people are going to be turned off by it?
I think it's going to have a really positive reaction. I think
Really? Okay.
I do. I feel like, we talked about episode 4, like Woe's Hollow, and how that was kind of the big episode, and there was a lot of creativity and thematic elements and like big swings in there. And I think this is kind of the same, but just on a different level with the more relationship level. And I think people are going to be really impressed with how it looks, with the chemistry between the actors. And I think, it kind of answers a little bit. I think it's really going to bring in the people who love Gemma and wanted to see more of her. I think it'll excite them. But I'm sure, like you said, there will be some people that are like, this isn't my fun Severance that I could laugh at. But the hardcore fans, I think, will appreciate it. And I could see this episode winning some Emmys and stuff. I think like this is maybe more than Woe's Hollow. Like this is the creative one. This is the crafty one that I could see winning some awards.
All right, you heard it here. Sean, thank you so much.